Racing to the Kentucky Derby 2020, and it's time for Pool 1 of the Kentucky Derby Futures. This is going to be the first of a two-part video. We are going to take a look at the first 12 horses listed in the Derby Futures pool, and then in part 2, we will start with horse number 13, which is Independence Hall, take you through the rest of the contenders for Pool 1 of Derby Futures. Remember, this is just kind of an overview of kind of where the horses sit at this time and which horses you might want to consider in the Derby Future Pool 1. I'm a big believer in playing some of the exacta pools and using the 24 very heavily, but you can kind of scope out a few horses and kind of just get a general overview of where the contenders sit as we are in the last week of November and start looking forward to the first week in May. Let's start at the top, and number 1 at 50-1 morning line is American Theorem. Now, American Theorem ran second to 8 rings in the American Pharoah Stakes, and then he had kind of a slow workout following that race, and they decided not to press on with him running in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. I think this was actually a nice effort. That second place finish, 8 rings, had everything going his way. He was hard sent that day to win that race and to get eligible for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. American Theorem kind of made a couple of moves in the race. He broke well, kind of sat 3 lengths back, and then kind of was put into a drive going into the turn, trying to catch 8 rings. I do think it's going to be interesting to watch the first crop of American Pharoah. That's who American Theorem is by. And Maria's Mon adds a little bit of precocity and also some stamina influences on the female side. So this is one at 50-1. I think he could be worth a couple of exacta bets with the field, maybe over or under if you're looking at a race like that. Annie Dior is a horse that ran second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and that was at 28-1 that day. Of course, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile overall was kind of a strangely run race. Dennis Moment broke slow, 8 rings didn't fire, and a couple of other horses did not fire. It was Annie Dior's first race on the dirt that day. He does have a dirt pedigree. Tappett's on the female side, Medaglia di Oro, who is a strong distance influence. Again, another one, 20-1 morning line. Ran a nice race, 102 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile for his Brisnet speed figure. He's one that figures to improve with racing, and I like the fact that he got 2 quick races in the fall of his 2-year-old year, and now he can kind of progress off that and maybe kind of round up into that 105, 1-10 Brisnet speed figure range, which is where he needs to be next May. So Annie Dior is another one I like long-term. Probably a little bit more turf in the pedigree, but distance shouldn't be an issue. And he was purchased for $480K. That owner does tend to run his horses at Golden Gate, so that doesn't concern me. And he won so impressively in that debut. And you're seeing more and more horses incorporate turf races into their past performances just so they don't get run down on the dirt. So Annie Dior, strong Breeders' Cup Juvenile runner-up, and I think one that can progress off that second place finish. Answer In, he could be the next Gouverneur. He's by Dialed In, the same sire as Gouverneur. Brad Cox trains this one. Robert LaPenta owns, and picked up a nice second place finish in his debut to South Bend. Won by 5 in a second lifetime race, and that came back with a fast Brisnet speed figure of 96. And he came from off the pace that day. It was a nice win at Churchill Downs. Overall, the fractions were fast. I would probably rate that pace that day above average pace, and at 7 furlongs, that's always a key winning distance, especially if you want to try to get them to that 1 1/8. There seems to be a strong correlation with 7 furlong races and going 1 1/16 and 1 1/8. Overall, it is kind of a win early pedigree, and he does have some stamina influences on both sides of the pedigree. 50-1 morning line, Answer In is definitely one you may want to take a look at. Authentic, he picked up a nice win in his debut for Bob Baffert. Into Mischief is the sire here. For those of you who have followed along on my Twitter feed, Into Mischief, it's going to be interesting with him. He gets all of the winners. They win early. They win often early. They just don't stretch out. And really, until you see that first horse go 9 furlongs, you know, Owendale's really the first one out of those first 4 crops that actually went on and put together a couple of big efforts at 9 furlongs. And even he seemed to have distance limitations in the Breeders' Cup Classic and the Travers Stakes. I guess Authentic, you know, positive signals he won his debut. That's always a positive sign. Negative is the sire Into Mischief, and he's also got a female speedy pedigree, Mr. Greeley. That also tends to be more speed oriented. I just have a feeling 10 furlongs is probably not going to be the best distance for Authentic. Basin from the first crop of Liam's Map, Breeders' Cup mile winner. Huge race in the Whitney as an older horse for Liam's Map. And Basin, you know, he won in the slop, so you always have to really wonder if he liked the slop or if he liked the surface. He won by 6 lengths in the Hopeful Stakes. I thought the Hopeful Stakes came up a little light this year. Gozilla dueled for the lead and just really didn't fire that day. And Shoplifted came back and did not run well in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So Basin has a tricky read on the form and tricky read on the pedigree if he is going to be able to go 10 furlongs. He's one to take a look at. I do think Liam's Map is going to get some win early type horses, and I do like his pedigree. I think long term he could get some 9 furlongs to 10 furlong horses. Dennis Moment, 15 to 1 in the morning line, son of Tisnow, should improve as a 3-year-old. Again, he broke slow out of the gate, a bad stumble in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile when he was favored at 4 to 5 that day. Drew off by 19 lengths in his victory at the Pea Patch at Ellis Park, then dominated the Iroquois Stakes. You know, another one that he's shown he can go wire to wire, but he's had 4 races now, and he clipped the heels in his debut. He stumbled badly in that last race. And for me, I want to see a race because, you know, he's now had 4 races, and 2 of those races he's encountered kind of some trip trouble. You know, you just want to see if he can come out and regroup. He has worked out since the galloped anyways, since the Breeders' Cup race. So Dennis Moment, you know, right now I kind of have to wait and see a race before I get back on that bandwagon. He did win impressively in his 2 wins. The pedigree says he should develop as a 3-year-old, and he does have a solid foundation with actually 4 races that he entered, and he only finished in 3 of them. 8 Rings, this was another horse that was really well meant to win his debut, then kind of ducked in for no reason in the Del Mar Futurity. Did not show in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, 2 no-show efforts, 2 wins. I thought he was hard-pressed in his American Pharoah victory. He went to the lead. They really wanted to win that day. And I think the long-term development from him is going to be stunted. He's worked out since then. I have a feeling we'll see him in the LaSalle Futurity. But 8 Rings, I think, is more of a win early type. I'm just not sure how far he can progress. Pedigree says he should be able to get 1.25 miles with Empire Maker and Unbridled on that top side. On the female side, a little bit more turf and some kind of some sturdy mares on that pedigree. So kind of some mixed signals with 8 Rings. Again, I just think he was all out to win the American Pharoah. And I think long term, they're going to press on into the LaSalle Futurity. And that's going to give him 5 races as a juvenile. And then I'm just not sure he's going to really be able to build off that. So 8 Rings is kind of a fade for me. Gouverneur Morris, this one, you know, big 9-length victory in his debut, ran into a monster in Maxfield in his second lifetime race. The race shape did not flatter him that day. He was forced to make a move from the outside into a hot pace, and then he had the wide draw that day. He's from the first crop of Constitution. So Gouverneur Morris probably can improve. I think we'll see him at Gulfstream this winter, and I could easily see him getting back on the winning end at 1 mile and 1 mile and a 16th. Not sure he wants 9 furlongs. And that first crop of Constitution is going to be interesting to see how they train forward in early 2020. Great Power is from Blame, who won the Breeders' Cup Classic over Zenyatta. Was not impressed with his debut win. He did come back with a 91 Brisnet speed figure. I had that race rated a little bit lower that day. Didn't like a lot of the horses in that race. So Great Power is definitely going to have to improve by about 10 Brisnet speed figure points in his second lifetime races to really make a dent early on in his 3-year-old year. He has not worked out since that victory on September 29th. So you're looking at a January getting back on the work tab possibly, and probably a race in February for Great Power. Green Light Go, another with 3 lifetime races already. Did not relish the slop. He kind of ran forwardly placed in his 2 wins, and then he faded in the Champagne after pressing some pretty intense fractions with Gozilla in the Champagne. I think he's capable of a better effort, but long term, I'm not sure he wants 9 furlongs. He probably will like an off track 50 to 1 morning line. I guess if he stays at that distance, he could be one to consider. But Green Light Go, he's another one I want to see I think that mile and a 16th, Gulfstream Park he'll like. I'm not sure with a full field going 9 furlongs, but it'll be interesting to see if they try to maybe go to the wood with him and maybe run a 2 prep campaign getting to the Derby. High Velocity, back-to-back wins to start his debut. He won the Bob Hope Stakes at even money, was under even money in his debut race. Quality Road, he continues to crank out some winners, and Dixie Union on the mare side. Definitely some upside with High Velocity as you look forward to 2020. He worked out since that Bob Hope win, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him entered in the Los Al Futurity later on this fall. And that's going to do it for the first half of this video. We're going to come back and start with Honor AP and Independence Hall in part 2. Leave a note. Who do you like of the top 11 contenders here in Pool 1? Who do you think is going to progress the most? And remember, hit subscribe as we race you all the way to the Kentucky Derby 2020 and the prep season for all the Derby preps in 2020. That's part 1 of the Kentucky Derby Future Wager. Who do you like? Leave a comment and hit subscribe. Part 2, make sure to look for that video later on today.